Hello and welcome to Jenny Eats the World. My name is Jenny and I'm here to teach you how to rock your world, whether that's through expanding your perspective or realizing that you deserve better. This podcast is going to offer you tips and tricks and stories of my past to teach you how to create a better future. So, this episode, I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about the past 3 years since moving to New York City all on my own and offer you the three biggest mistakes that I made that hopefully you won't have to the next time you make a major life decision. So, just to back up, I grew up in Kansas City. I didn't leave the North American continent until I was 21. And I did so to study abroad in Italy. And that semester completely reshaped everything. I realized that there's so much more to life than the drama happening in my backyard. And with that peek into what's possible, I realized that I didn't want to follow suit from what my parents told me that I should do after college. And I really questioned my trajectory because for all of my teenage life, I wanted to graduate college and get my MRS degree. I really wanted to get wifed up, to get knocked up, and to be some man's darling wife. I still want that, y'all. I still want that so badly. But when I first traveled, I realized that, whoa, there's so much more that I want to do. There's so much that I want to accomplish. And why not do both? Why not have a creative career? Why not go on those solo trips and then get married and then have kids? Because while we don't know when our time is up, we have some of it. It is a paradox to think about life in that way, but we kind of have to live as if today might be our last, but also know that the real big goals that God has implemented in our soul are going to take some time to sow and water and watch grow. So, I think the first question to ask and ask anyone when they live in New York is, was New York the big dream? Was it something you always wanted to do? And my answer was no. I never really thought I was going to move to New York, not in the way that I did. I always thought that New York was this place that I would visit after I had made all my riches, because it is definitely a place that is incredible when you have money. But when you are tight on money, it can also be a place that is incredible. You just have to go about it a little differently on a tighter budget. So I want to dial back to look back at 3.5 years ago when I was living in my hometown of Kansas City. I was on a trip, a very impulsive trip, visiting Paris for the first time. I realized that in this week of being in the French metropolis, that I was in this epicenter of where artists have flocked to for eons. I realized that I was in this city that people from around the world have been saving for years to visit. And that kind of magnetism made me realize that I needed to stay in cities like this. I needed to move to a global metropolis, live in a big city to make my big girl dreams come true. And my big girl dream is sharing my story, Jenny Eats the World, available on Amazon, because this story is something that I hope and trust will help others when they think about their life path and their addictions and their coming of age. That is all represented in the book, Jenny Eats the World, now available on Amazon. So it's December 2022. I just got back from Paris and I was in a funk, leaning heavily into weed and to substances. I would actually in order to keep this like romanticized life that I had lived for a week in Paris, I started going to French restaurants after I would teach like a 6 a.m. yoga class. I would go in, I would order brunch, I would order a cocktail, and I would journal as if I was this really moody, cool writer. Like, I don't know if this is something Ernest Hemingway did, but I was trying to channel that. I was trying to stay connected to this beloved city of Paris that gave me the creative spark because I was doing very similar things in Paris. I was just going to cafes, writing, sometimes drinking, sometimes not, sometimes smoking a cigarette as we do, because there's nothing wrong with living a double life. So I was starting this bad habit of going to restaurants, spending so much money on food just to journal, just to get away, just to have a little bit of solitude like I had in my week in Paris. But in reality, I was just getting buzzed and starting to binge again. And I had worked so hard in the last 4 years healing my relationship to body and food. And yet I had never, ever questioned my relationships to substance abuse. And it's not like during this time that I was getting wasted like I did in my youth, because when I became a yoga teacher in 2019, I learned the tenet ahimsa, which means non-harming. And when I learned about ahimsa in 2019, my yoga teacher training, I realized that every time I binge drank, every time I binge ate, every time I then unate that binge food, I was actively harming myself. And since that point, I have dramatically cut out drinking, and I haven't snorted a drug since. But I realized that I couldn't remember a time that I was actually sober. Like maybe I wasn't getting wasted, maybe I wasn't blacking out again, but I was replacing the heavy drinking with a little psychedelics and a lot of weed. Like there was never a day that I didn't put anything in my body that altered my state. And I thought, maybe it's time to look at this. I had to ask myself what I might achieve if I turned out all the noise and all the distractions from daily toking and all these weekend parties. And I realized that my friends weren't going to quit drugs anytime soon, nor were they about to leave Kansas City to pursue their dreams. And that's okay. But I was ready for a major life change, and sobriety seemed like a good start. Now, this conversation is about New York, but New York would not have happened if I never got sober and had the audacity to say that, quote, New York won't be that expensive if I'm not drinking, which, to be fair, is somewhat true considering the painful price we pay for a glass of rosé in the city. And I also figured that if I moved to the birthplace of AA, then surely I'd be taken care of. So it's spring 2023. I'm a few months back from my trip to Paris, and now I am newly sober. I am announcing to the entire world that I'm no longer taking drugs while also lambasting those who do with all of my aggressive memes I'm making for Instagram. You know, I just wanted to take a moment to apologize to all the people in Kansas City that I tormented and that I ridiculed online. Because while it was hard for me to see when I was like 3 days sober, that I was criticizing something that I actively took part on. I just wanted to change my life so quickly that I failed to realize the impact on the community that I would create when I asserted myself as this new sober being. And I want to emphasize that me announcing to the world that I'm sober was the dumbest thing I could have done. And if you ever get sober, I know how exciting it is. I know how proud you are, and I'm so proud of you. But you don't have to announce it online. You surely don't need to make it your entire personality because let me tell you something, sweetie, sobriety is not a personality. Sobriety is not a personality. I tried really hard to make it my personality and I failed miserably. So if you are newly sober, congrats. It's a one hell of a time, but you may want to change your minds. And then you're going to come into a conflict with yourself, wondering who you are when you're sober and when you're not. And if people care, which part of the scale that you fall on. Because ultimately, I don't want someone to be proud of me because I'm sober. I want people to be proud of me because I made them feel good. And you don't have to be sober to make people feel good or make people feel special or seen or heard. And before I get into some murky waters and piss some people off, I'm just going to revert back to the story of moving to New York, which of course has to entail my sobriety story. So I will admit, I always thought I'd start my acting career in LA. And I even planned out a road trip at the start of 2023. But there were a few men in my life that steered me the other way. The first man was this very kind fellow that I actually met through the yoga and sobriety community. He had paid me so well to watch his Jack Russell Terrier many, many times before my move. And this man had grown up in New York. So his place was filled with New York paraphernalia. And I was drinking his espresso through his I Heart New York mug. I thought to myself, this man is incredibly nice, and he is from New York City. Therefore, not everyone in New York City could be mean like I have been programmed to believe. So the second man was the owner of the restaurant that I worked at, and he had lived in New York for about a decade or so, training as a chef. And he had just taken his sons to New York for a spring break. And when he came back, he told me, Jenny, I saw your doppelganger. This girl just had that confidence that you had. And I really think that you need to get out of Kansas City. And I really think that you should reconsider going from LA to New York. Because at the point, that was my plan. And as this man is telling me to GTFO, I thought, wow, this is the kindest thing a gentleman's ever told me that I should get out. Thank you. You really see me. And there is another man that I met at that restaurant that left me his number, but that story is going to be behind the payroll. The paywall, the paywall. That story is going to be behind the paywall. So it's spring of 2023. I'm like 2 months sober. I have really compromised my friendships in Kansas City because now I've had this new persona of being sober while pointing my fingers at all you party goers still taking drugs. Like, how dare you do that? I mean, yeah, I was doing drugs with you just 3 weeks ago, but now I'm not. So therefore, I'm better than you. And that is the attitude I held. And that's why I think we should all just chill out when we first get sober and avoid going to the internet to talk about it, at least for the first 6 months. Okay. At least for the first 6 months, but still be proud. You're doing a good job. All right. So I'm sober. I have this great idea that I should move to New York because if I'm sober, I can do anything. And so I sold all my things. I found an Airbnb for the whole month of June. I wrangled up $2,000 in cash and I prayed to God that he would help me with the rest. Was I ready? No. And you bet your ass I was going to YouTube trying to search for how to prepare for your move to New York or what it's like to live in New York. Like, it's kind of like surgery. You don't read about surgery, you just got to do the surgery. No one can tell you what it's like for a grand move. You just gotta freaking do it and find out. One reason I decided to make this move was because when I was searching for flights, JetBlue had a one-way from MCI to JFK that was flight number 2222. And I was born on the 22nd of June. So I took that as an omen that it's time to fly, baby. And that was all regardless that I had no job, I had no friends, and I had no plan but to find a restaurant job and take acting classes. And also to stay sober because, as predicted, everyone told me that my sobriety was not going to last. Everyone told me in those first AA meetings I had in Kansas City that I should be careful because in early sobriety, you're most likely to relapse. That big, heavy R word. And turns out I did. I moved to New York, barely 4 months sober, and I had never been this clean since I was a teenager. And I was now about to turn 31. That first week in New York blows by so fast. I'm trying to see some things. I'm trying to tell myself, like, well, I'll start working, so maybe do some touristy things now. But despite the hundreds of restaurants that I applied to, no one had gotten back to me. And despite emailing every single yoga studio in New York, everyone told me I'd have to take their training if they would consider auditioning me. So I was defeated in a week's time. And concurrently, my Airbnb host was trying to scam me. So I had this pot in my Airbnb room. It had, I don't know, like 4 or 5 feet of dead grass. I don't know what the plant was supposed to be, but it was dead. And it was lurching over my bed, taking up a lot of space in the room. So I put it on the balcony. And a few days later, it's chopped off. Like the whole grass shrubbery has been macheted off. And I thought, huh. And I took a photo of it. Like, oh, what is this? Why did he do that? Is he going to repot? I don't know. Not my plant, not my problem. And later that day, he texts me, what did you do to my plant? That was $200. I expect the $200 in cash immediately. And I'm like, hey, bud, let's talk about this like adults before you just accuse me of something I did not do. And then in person, he continues to tell me that this plant was $300 and that he expects the cash immediately. And I say, hey, do you have receipts? Because I want to know that you're not lying to me. And he goes, no, I don't have receipts, but I got it in Soho, as if I don't know anything. And if you just say something's from Soho, it immediately adds value to that thing. So I said, okay, hey, you know what? Let me just get you a new plant and we'll call it even. How's that sound? So all in this time, I had just met a woman who lives a block away from my Airbnb. And in that night, I packed up all my things and I started staying with this new woman who just so happened to be leaving her apartment for 2 weeks and would let me stay with her as long as I watch her cats. I thought, great, this is perfect. This is God's way of intervening and taking care of me. So I get to this new place. I guess my technically second move in New York hasn't even been 2 weeks. And I am staying in the room of the roommates. In this room of the roommates, there is a piece of weed paraphernalia with weed remnants still in the bowl. And without thinking twice, after 4 months of being completely sober, after 1 week of having no leads, no movement in my job search, I hit the bowl and I get high. And then I stayed high for 3 more months. I was barely getting work. I was scraping by off of catering gigs and just dog sitting, random gigs for me to just make it by. And I will say, my birthday happened 3 weeks after my move. And if I didn't ask for people to Venmo me, I wouldn't have made rent the next month. Because of your generosity, I was able to stay in New York for that first summer. So thank you. Thank you. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about the support I got from my father, a man who never gave me a dollar in my adult days. But when I got sober, he told me he knew I wasn't going to use this money for drugs and alcohol. And that's why he was helping me out. So thank you, Dad. Thank you for trusting me with that money that went straight to rent. So, regardless to say, the first 3 months in New York were a big hot mess. I moved 4 times before finally settling down with a woman that I met at an AA meeting. I was getting so desperate that I was still going to AA meetings every single day. I was stoned, mind you, and begging people to help me out, to find a job, to find a safe place to stay. And so one meeting, I raised my hand in what's called a burning desire and very blubberly say, I don't have a job and I don't know where I'm going to stay next month and I just really need someone to help me out. And then this woman came up to me and said, I think I can help you with both. And she did. She gave me a little bed behind some panels in her hallway in this beautiful 1-bedroom apartment in Williamsburg. And then she got me the restaurant job that I would have for about a year's time that I absolutely loved. It's still such a great location. It's Cafe Colette. You guys got to go if you haven't done so. And so in that year, I was starting to get a little bit more of a grip. Thanks to my roommate, I had a safe place to stay. I was able to make rent. I was able to get in a good routine where I was going to AA meetings every morning. I was working 4 nights or 5 nights a week at Cafe Colette. I did my first stand-up bit. I published Jenny Eats the World, and I got paid for my first acting gig for HBO. Now, granted, it was a documentary and my character did get edited out, but that's okay because I still did the things I said I was going to move to New York to do. So, on one hand, I was starting to find some stability and I was working my sobriety program. And yet, on the other hand, I was starting to binge and purge again. And no one in AA seemed too concerned about this. Everyone kept telling me that as long as I stay sober, that's literally all I need to do. That as long as I work the program, everything else will work out. And no one seemed to be concerned with the fact that my other addiction, the addiction that I have had all my life, that has manifested way before I ever had my first drink, way before I ever did my first drug, was now coming to the surface and taking over my life. And I have a theory about this. I think that my eating disorder started to take over once I got sober, not because I was playing what they say whack-a-mole with my addictions, meaning that once you put the drink down, you put the sex up, or once you stop having sex with strangers, you're going to start gambling. You get the gist, right? And I don't think it was entirely that. I think what happened was that I put myself in such a new environment that that alone will shock up someone's nervous system. And I think a lot of my binging was a result of feeling so ungrounded that I literally wanted to weigh myself down with food so I could have a sense of stability. Now, before I say this, I just want to acknowledge anyone who's in a 12-step program that 12-step programs are incredible. And I'm so grateful for my time in it. And I wouldn't be alive if my dad never went to an AA meeting. So thank you for doing your work. But I am concerned about the things that we tell ourselves when we're in that room. Because in reality, I really wasn't that big of a drinker in the last few years leading up to entering AA. I didn't go to AA because I hit rock bottom, because I crashed my car, because I got kicked out of a club. I mean, all of those things have happened. But I have done so much work and introspective digging in my relationship with alcohol and my relationship with drugs to see, like, why is it that I really do that? But because in these meetings, all we focused on were the hard times, and we continued to tell ourselves that we were diseased. We continued to tell ourselves that we are uncontrollable when it comes to this substance. I really believed that I was this maniacal, hungry, insatiable monster, whether it was with drugs, whether it was with food, whether it was with men or attention. Going to meetings every single day for 2 years made me believe that I was insane and that God was going to be the only one to save me. And that could be true, but I prefer today to live in a life with a little bit more agency. Not to say that I'm stepping into my own will, that I'm in my own self-will, like fellows might have told me in the past, but that I really want to choose, like, what is it am I saying to myself? And do I believe that? Like, when I wake up, do I want the first thing I tell God to be is, please keep me sober, please keep me sober, as if it's the most important thing? Not necessarily. I would rather pray to God, thanking God for this beautiful life, and ask God, how can I be in service to others? And sometimes being in service to others means staying sober, and sometimes being service to others just means being a good listener and doing the right thing without trying to let anyone know that you did it. So a year goes by in New York City, and I'm feeling pretty good. I have a job that pays me okay. I have a couple friends that I've met through AA, and I am somewhat staying connected to my projects and my creativity. But there is this cloud. There is this constant worry and comparison factor, as I was someone who was making very little money, and yet I was spending most of it on food and boutique fitness classes, which is the worst thing to put your money in if you're having bad body dysmorphia. Now, I was going to bar classes, literally crying every time we would bend over and look at the floor. I would just use that time to just pour my emotions out and then try to save face when we'd lift back up and try not to cry again when I would compare myself to the literal models in the room. I think that was so jarring for me at the beginning, was to see that there's so many people in the city that get paid to look good. And then I can't compare myself to these 18, 20-year-olds who have a photo shoot later today when I am struggling with binging again. I was just constantly putting myself up against these women that I did not know, and I did not know their stories. And yet I would hypothesize how much better their life must be because they're beautiful and thin. And that ruled my thinking for many years of my first few moments in New York. Okay, so I was with this woman in Williamsburg for a nice 8 months. And while she was lovely, and while we're still going to get coffee later this week, I was just getting really tired of living behind a screen. Like, literally, I was just living behind panels, and I was ready to get my own room. So I reached out to one of my very few friends that I had made in AA, who was very, very Catholic, and she had been living in a convent. And so within a few short emails, I was now living in a convent, which I think is what everyone's favorite fun fact about me is. So let me give you a little download of what it's like to live in a convent. First thing everyone asks is if you have to be a nun. And the answer is no, because I don't think this is actually an active convent. It's just a convent where nuns used to live. Now, there are still a few rules that we must still abide by, which are no guests, no boys, no drugs or alcohol, and that we have to share an entire kitchen with the entire building, which is okay because I do love a good girl dinner and hard-boiled eggs for many of my meals. So it's been cool. It's been good. I really do love the convent. And in that first year of living in the convent, I was able to do a lot of things that I had never done before. I debuted on a New York stage, albeit it was off Broadway, but I also started to work a lot more background gigs where I got to be on set of these high production, where I got to brush shoulders with Maggie Gyllenhaal and Christian Bale, like epic, epic, epic artists of our time. And while I kept thinking to myself, like, yeah, but I'm not really auditioning. Yeah, but I'm not really getting big casted roles. Or like, yeah, I'm doing the thing, but I'm not where I want to be. That exact kind of thinking kept me feeling like a super low vibrational state. And it just allowed me to barely skim the radar of the life that I came here for. I was just getting by. I wasn't truly thriving. And all of this really started to crumble when I hit my 2-year mark in New York. And I told my very few friends I had made in AA that I have been in New York for 2 years, and all I know are people in AA. And everyone who I've told this to has responded, well, what is wrong with that? In my response, I ponder and tilt my head and say, what do you mean, what's wrong with that? It is New York City. There are 8 million people here. You think I should just be hanging out with the sober ones? Or better yet, do you think I should just be hanging out with the ones that claim to be an uncontrollable drinker? No, I don't think that's much of a life at all. I don't think we're meant to live a life where we only surround ourselves with people who look, think, and talk like us. I mean, it's New York freaking city. This city wouldn't be New York without its diversity. And yes, within the rooms, there's so much diversity in AA, but sometimes when you are stuck in an echo chamber, it's really hard to remember how much you can learn from people outside of your circles. So, with this feedback from my lovely AA fellows who made it seem even more culty than it needed to be, I started to leave. I would actually go to an AA meeting, see the little sign outside the church door, and then walk away because there was something in my body that just could not go inside because I knew I didn't want to sit in a room for an hour telling myself that I had an incurable disease. I don't think it was helping me, and I do think it was affecting my eating. Now, something that happened within these 2 years moving to New York that finally made the change for my life to turn around and make me feel like I actually belong to New York is when I found my yoga community at Three Jewels in the Lower East Side. And I started volunteering and taking their Dharma philosophy courses. I said it in my first podcast, and I'll say it again. I was in my first philosophy course with the president, Hector Marcel, and he was saying that everything in our life is caused by us. Now, I'm sure you've heard this before in some type of like pop woo-woo TikToker, but it's so true that we are creating our reality. And that's why I felt such an aversion towards AA is that I was telling myself I was sick and diseased every single day. And while I stayed sober because I was afraid to take a drink, I started binge eating. I started purging. I started hiding from everyone and everything. And so I started to really ask myself, why did I come to New York in this first place? Like, who was I trying to be? And I want to have a short little story about how when I moved to New York, I made the conscious decision to change the way you address me from Jenny to Jennifer. Because in my mind, Jenny was this immature, young, juvenile, party girl, hippie, yogi, Midwesterner. And there's nothing wrong with being a Midwesterner. But I wanted Jennifer to be this sophisticated artist with decorum, who was demure and who was a New Yorker. But the thing is that when I moved to New York, I thought getting sober and touching down in a new state would mean that I would also need to change everything about me as well. And that was the first fatal flaw. Thinking that in order to change my life, I needed to change my personality too. And so when I did this whole rebrand from Jenny to Jennifer, it all blew up in my face because I couldn't even order a coffee without getting confused. Like, let's say I ordered like this really sweet, crazy drink that I knew was actually a binge order. I would say Jennifer, and then I'd freak out because I was like, no, Jennifer doesn't binge. Jennifer doesn't order sprinkles and whipped cream with her frappuccino. Jennifer orders a cortado and drinks it like a lady. So I was having all this cognitive dissonance, calling myself Jennifer, but really missing Jenny. And it also manifested in ways in that I was starting to dress differently. I was gaining weight, so I was just wearing these pillowcases, it felt like. I had gotten a modeling gig where they chopped off all my hair. I mean, granted, they paid me $400 and the haircut looked really good, but when it started to grow out and get into that awkward length, I truly didn't know who I was. And listen, I'm a big ally, but I'm as straight as a motherfucking pencil. And everyone kept asking me if I was gay. And I just was like, I don't, maybe I am. Maybe you need to tell me who I am because I have forgotten. And I think this is one of those rites of passage most people have when they move to New York without a partner or without a job and are really trying to figure it out. I think they come to New York with a goal in mind, and it's New York's job to distract you at any length, just so you have to remind yourself who you are and why you came here. Now, I do want to offer you a couple lessons that I learned if they haven't been flushed out already, but let me just wrap up this third year in New York, still living in the convent, with this lasting message. It's that when I stopped judging myself and when I stopped judging others, things just got a lot easier. I truly do believe that my weight loss is less about calories in, calories out, and more about the ways that I've been speaking about food and bodies. For example, you walk past hundreds, if not thousands, of people in New York every single day. You have hundreds, if not thousands, of opportunities to think about others. And so when I consciously tried to change any negative or judgmental thought about another person's body into, wow, look at them strut. I hope that they felt really good putting on their outfit today because they look really good and they are owning their energy. I was giving people pump up talks in my brain as I was making my way to the subway. And these little mind tricks made it so I was no longer craving a pint of Ben and Jerry's at night. Go figure. So while I have so many other details and stories that happen in the last 3 years of New York City, I just want to end this podcast by sharing with you the three biggest mistakes I made that I hope anyone who's about to make a major life transition can keep in mind before they repeat my bad behaviors. So, number one, my first big mistake that I made was thinking that I could do it alone. I literally never wrote in any of my journal entries that I should prioritize making friends. I was more concerned about making money. I was more concerned about where I was going to live. I was more concerned about how I was being perceived. And nowhere in my list of things to do did I write down make friends. And that was so apparent because I did not make friends. The very few friends I had, well, one stopped talking to me once I said I wasn't interested in AA meetings anymore, but they also were kind of forced upon me. I felt like I never, okay, there's one person, and you know who you are, and I love you so much, who has stayed with me since month one. They are the exception. Everyone else, I feel like I was trying so hard to put on a show. I was trying to be this Jennifer that I didn't even know who was. And I was always listening to people's story, trying to understand how they got to where they are now without trying to really understand who this person was. Like, I was more interested in the tips and tricks that they could offer me than to just see them as a living, breathing person. Right. And I hear that a lot in like the stereotypes of LA, like, oh, don't go to an LA party. Everyone's just going to see if you're a producer and trying to get you to sign them, yada, yada. And I honestly, I was that person. I was like, who are you? What do you do? What can you offer me? And how can I utilize you? And that's just not the cutest way to make friends. So step number one, or mistake number one, I should say, is that I did not prioritize making friends, and I wish I had. And now that I have prioritized making friends, guess what? I have them and they're awesome. And I know you're listening to this and I love you. So, mistake number two was not finding my yoga community or not prioritizing finding my yoga community. Because AA is a community, yes. However, there are circumstances of which you must abide by to stay in AA. Now, a yoga community, I don't know, the ones I've noticed, they don't really care whether you're sober or not. They don't really care if you leave for Mexico for a month or not. They don't really care if you're taking every single class every single week or not. They're just happy to be there. And when you can provide some extra happiness and joy in that community, then guess what? You get to be a part of the community. There's very low entrance costs and very low exit costs. And if you want to know more about what it takes to be a cult, think about the exit costs. Now, not everyone is going to take a yoga class and be like, boom, friends, boom, people I can talk to. As that was the case for me. It took me many months of volunteering at Three Jewels before I started to really feel like I had a place there. And I was not just volunteering, I was asking where else I could help. I was putting myself into more projects. And I was slowly, and this took a minute because I had really lost a lot of my self-confidence, but I slowly started asking people to get coffee because unfortunately, I developed the belief that I wasn't as fun as I used to be. And I'm not going to say that sobriety made me less fun, but I was definitely not the same person I was beforehand. And so that leads me with my third mistake that I had made, which I think was trying to make sobriety my personality. And I love him and I know he loves me, but I think that my dad got so proud of me and put so much emphasis on my sobriety, he forgot the fact that there's so many other things about me to to love. And that goes for you too. Whether or not you drink, whether or not you take drugs, whether or not you've had a really complicated relationships with substances, I want you to know that you are lovable and valuable whether or not you're sober. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't you ever think that if you smoke some weed, you're a bad person because of it. I just want to reinforce my apologies to anyone that I've ever hurt. for being an asshole when I was sober, and I want to apologize to anyone I ever hurt when I was an asshole when I was under the influence. I think what New York has really taught me is that people, places, and things are going to continue to try to label you. For so long, I really tried to project this identity that I had my shit together, that I knew what I was doing, that I was this responsible, sober, austere person, and that's simply not who I am. I am goofy. I am silly. I am about to be 34, but I'm a New York 25 and have been told I have 22-year-old energy. And I love that. I am so grateful for that because I don't take things so seriously. And at the same time, I'm so passionate about the things I love and the people I love. I hope I flushed out all of the things I meant to, and I trust that if you have listened to the end of this episode, that you've gotten something out of it. Remember that nothing in this life can be done alone. Not even this podcast. I mean, I'm the only one producing it right now, but it takes you, the listener, to engage for it to be a show. So thank you. I just hope you know that when you want to change your life, yes, you have to change your thoughts, your speech, your action too. But that doesn't mean you need to change all of you. You have this essence that may never change, right? You have a blueprint of who you are. And that blueprint is so spectacular. There might be habits that are unhealthy that you do want to change. That's great. Please do. But don't feel like you have to change your personality along with your habits. You are so lovable because of all the weird ways that you present yourself. Don't ever let anyone tell you to be quiet or dim your light for them to feel secure. And in a city of 8 million, you are always being challenged with people's insecurity. And it really is a city where everyone has a chance to be seen. It really is that big. So ask yourself, what are you going to do to allow yourself to be seen? Or how have you changed an aspect of your life without changing who you are? Were you able to move across the country and still keep your personality? I hope you were. Or did you change jobs while still keeping that vigorous work ethic? I hope I've left you with something to think about, and I hope that you know that your work is important, that you're important, and that you are really loved, whether or not you like to smoke the devil's grass. Until next time, you've been listening to Jenny Eats the World. Give me a follow on the YouTube, give me a subscribe on the Substack, and go see what I'm up to on my stories on Instagram at Jennifer Martin Live. This has been really fun making this content as we are day 2 from being let go of my biggest job yet. So if you've liked these episodes, again, please subscribe, share, and comment. What did you like the most? What would you like to hear more of? I've got lots to yap about, but I want to make this not so one way and would love to hear what you have to say. Okay, bye-bye, my darlings. I don't know what my official sound off will be quite yet. Oh, how's this? Love you. Mean it.